What would you do if you saw someone vulnerable being harassed, someone who couldn't even stand up for herself? Most people would look away, pretend it wasn't their business. But one man made a choice, and that choice set off a chain reaction so powerful, it united hundreds of bikers and left even the police stunned. This is not just a story about bikers, or the law, or a woman in a wheelchair. It's about courage, loyalty, and what happens when ordinary people refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice. It was a warm afternoon in a small American town where the hum of engines was almost part of the atmosphere. Outside a diner, parked in the corner lot, was a group of motorcycles, their chrome catching the sun. Among them was a woman, tough-looking, leather vest patched with the infamous Hells Angels logo, but she was seated in a wheelchair. Her name was Roxanne, though most called her Roxy. Once a rider herself, an accident had left her paralyzed from the waist down. But what she hadn't lost was her spirit, sharp tongue, quick wit, and the heart of a lioness. That afternoon, she had rolled up to the diner for coffee and fresh air. The staff knew her, treated her with respect. But when two local cops pulled up, things changed. They eyed her patch, her chair, her independence, everything about her seemed to irritate them. Instead of a simple hello, their voices carried hostility. "Where'd you steal that vest from?" one officer sneered. "You don't look like much of a biker to me." Roxy kept calm, but her jaw tightened. "It's mine. I earned it. Not that it's any of your business." That wasn't enough for them. They began circling her like vultures, making snide comments about her being washed up, questioning her presence, even threatening to check the chair for contraband. Customers inside the diner looked out nervously but didn't intervene. That's when Ethan appeared. Ethan wasn't a biker. He was an ordinary guy in his 30s, an auto mechanic who'd just gotten off work. Grease still smudged his hands, his shirt clung with the smell of engine oil. He'd seen plenty of cops throw their weight around before, but something about watching them lean over a woman in a wheelchair, mocking her, intimidating her, lit a fire in his chest. He walked right up. "Hey, that's enough," he said firmly. The cops turned to him, surprised. "Excuse me," one barked. "You heard me," Ethan said, standing tall though his heart was racing. "She hasn't done a damn thing wrong. You don't get to treat people like that, especially not someone in a wheelchair." The silence that followed was thick. One officer squared his shoulders, stepping close to Ethan. "You interfering with police business?" Ethan held his ground. His voice didn't shake. "If harassing a woman in public is police business, then yeah, I'm interfering." Inside the diner, people pressed closer to the windows. Roxy's eyes widened, not in fear, but in awe. She had been strong all her life, but in that moment, seeing a stranger stand up for her left her speechless. The cops muttered threats but, realizing a crowd was gathering, finally backed off, throwing a few parting words before retreating to their car. Ethan exhaled slowly, adrenaline crashing through his veins. He turned to Roxy. "You okay?" Roxy gave him a crooked smile. "More than okay. You just made some enemies, and a friend." What Ethan didn't know was that word of what happened would spread like wildfire through the biker community. And the next time the cops thought about bothering Roxy, they wouldn't just be facing one man's courage, they'd be facing an army. The incident outside the diner didn't end there. That night, Roxy shared the story with her brothers and sisters in the Hells Angels. The message spread across state lines, through phone calls and roaring engines. Ethan's name came up again and again, the stranger who stood tall when nobody else would. A week later, Ethan's life was back to normal. Or so he thought. He was back at the garage, fixing up an old pickup, when the rumble started. At first, it was faint, like distant thunder. But then it grew louder, heavier, shaking the ground beneath his boots. He stepped outside and froze. Down the highway came a wave of motorcycles, dozens, then hundreds. Chrome flashing, leather vests gleaming, engines snarling like beasts. Cars pulled over, pedestrians stopped in awe. The line of bikes seemed endless, and at the front was Roxy in her wheelchair, strapped to a custom trike that a fellow biker had built for her. They weren't there for trouble. They were there for solidarity. For Roxy. For Ethan. The bikes roared into the lot across from Ethan's garage. Around 250 Hells Angels filled the space, shutting down the street with sheer presence. Ethan stood speechless, rag still in his hand. Roxy rolled forward, grinning ear to ear. "Told you made a friend," she said. "Turns out you made a whole family." The cops arrived minutes later, sirens wailing. But this time, the scene was different. 2 officers against 250 bikers wasn't even a contest. The police slowed, their bravado vanishing as they saw the sheer wall of support behind Roxy. One of the bikers leaned close to Ethan. "You got guts, brother." Most people would have walked away. Ethan shook his head humbly. "I just did what was right." And that's when Roxy looked at him with fire in her eyes. "That's the point. Doing what's right, even when you're alone, that's rare. But now, you'll never be alone again." The cops backed off without a word. The bikers stayed long after, filling the air with laughter, stories, and the smell of gasoline. Ethan, once an outsider, now found himself surrounded by people who valued loyalty above all else. That day became legend in the town. Not because of violence, but because one man's choice to defend someone in need sparked a movement of solidarity. Ethan never considered himself a hero. But for Roxy, and for 250 bikers who showed the world what loyalty meant, he became exactly that. Sometimes, it only takes one voice to break the silence. One act of courage to turn strangers into family. Ethan didn't just defend a woman in a wheelchair, he defended dignity, respect, and humanity itself. And when the world saw it, they answered with thunder. So the next time you see someone being treated unfairly, remember Ethan, Roxy, and the 250 bikers. Because courage is contagious. And when you stand up for what's right, you might just inspire an army to stand with you.